maybe they're actually quite lazy with their creativity.
Art and culture and creativity is very important for society.
There is a lot of rubbish out there.
I'm going to enter into dangerous waters here.
Okay.
So are we all wrong?
This is the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast by visualeducation.com. Episode 6. Can you learn to be creative?
Welcome back, guys, to our podcast. Thanks for joining us. We have the usual delinquents around the table. I'm not even going to introduce you. I'm not going to introduce you today. Introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Emma. I am our marketing exec here at Visual Education.
I'm Ben Toom, the super amazing camera extraordinaire, video editing.
Hold on, I thought in a professional capacity you called yourself Benjamin. Well, you said Ben.
It's 50-50 on credits.
50-50,
yeah,
right. And Tim? No, I can't be bothered. Right, okay. I'm Karl Taylor, photographer and director. And Tim Godion, off you go.
Tim Godion, I'm the creative director at Visual Education and I'm an artist and illustrator.
Excellent. Right, good. Okay, let's get started with the question of the topic of today's podcast is, can you learn to be creative? We're going to do a quick round the table. Emma, yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
From Ben?
Yes.
Yes, from Tim? And a yes from me as well.
Oh, nice diverse opinions there.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's good that we did say yes because we do run an education platform. It'd be a bit ironic if we feel we could.
Sad if it was no. Just this grey, boring man with no creativity, and he can never learn.
Well, let's dive into it a little bit more. Why then are some people what we consider more creative than others or more naturally gifted? Emma?
I think it's about time and how much you value your creativity, maybe. I think some people maybe value creativity more, so they're more likely to actually put their creativity into practice.
Okay, that's a good point.
So I can think about painting all I want and have all these creative ideas, but until I actually sit there and do it, am I actually
feel
inclined to do it? Am I actually being creative?
So would you say then that someone who feels more inclined to do it is more creative?
Yes.
Right, interesting.
Potentially.
Okay. Ben, born creative or more creative?
Yeah, I don't know. Does creativity... Is it stem from like your two different sides of your brain? Is that like critical thinking and then creative thinking? And some people utilize different sections more because there must be some element of that. And also how much like creativity like you consume yourself. Like if you listen to loads of music or look at art and go to museums all the time and watch loads of movies and stuff like that, does that help you be more creative?
Creativity from absorption.
Yeah, because you're consuming
life
it and
but then that's a little bit like Emma. You'd have to feel inclined to want to absorb
do it
that.
yourself, I suppose.
I think like I'm not the most creative person in the world, but like if you take like me and my partner, like I act on my creativity and will sit there at the weekend and knit and paint and do stuff. Whereas if he tried, he'd be really good at it and really creative, but that's just not what interests him.
How do you know he would?
Because I've forced him to do it before. And like he is really good at it, but he just doesn't have that inclination
Is that enjoyment?
enjoyment in doing it.
It almost sounds like it comes down a bit to what you're interested in. So you've got to want to do it. I think that's the thing, isn't it? You've got to want to try. And I think the trying bit is the important bit because a lot of people are nervous of putting themselves out there in a kind of creative sphere. I mean, I'm very keen on skateboarding and surfing and those kind of sports, and there's a real synergy with those sports and kind of art and culture. And I see a lot of people that I know through those sports and hobbies, they're very keen on the arts and creative as a whole, just because part of the kind of culture of that type of person is like the brands and the designs and the fashion and the art side of it and the street art.
Almost you're more drawn to that sort of creative sphere if you're in that other sphere.
I think so, yeah. I think some people have got that all the creativity all around them, so they kind of almost creative without knowing that they're being creative and that.
I mean, the question obviously is, can you learn to be creative? And we all agree that you can. So really the point here is whether or not some people have more natural ability in just the way they're wired, as Ben said, or the way they think, the body, etc. You know, some people are naturally more athletic than other people because they have better bone structure, muscles, physical build, and therefore they...
I think you can, but I think you also have to just practice, don't you? If I tried to draw hands every single day for the next year, by the end,
you'd get good at drawing hands.
I'd get good at it. In the same way that if I went for a run every day for the next year, I'd get better at running.
Yeah.
Also, when you say draw hands, you don't necessarily have to draw hands that are completely realistic.
No.
That you could have a really beautiful style of hands, and that could be your own kind of way of drawing.
Yeah. You sort of got to work on that creativity in order to get better at a skill.
So is creativity a skill then? Like, because obviously you could get good at anything, really, like if you really try.
I mean, this is the thing. It's like a kung fu master. No one is born a kung fu master. It takes tens of thousands of hours to become a kung fu master. Now, someone may be slightly more talented in agility and movement, etc., to begin with, but they're never going to be a kung fu master on day 3. They're going to have to put the hours. There's that old adage that it takes 10,000 hours, the 10,000 hours rule, for you to master a skill.
I always hear the saying, like, if you try, you will succeed. And I think it might take you a long time, but if you really put all your effort and focus into that, then you are going to succeed at some point.
If you take away the skill aspect then, and it's only the sort of coming up with ideas, how does that sort of...
So I teach a lot of art classes and small sort of workshops where I do a kind of work with a group of people that and a lot of them are complete newbies that want to just try out painting and say oils or watercolors for the first time. Some of them will say, I've done this at school, or I haven't painted since school. Some of them haven't done it ever. And it's very interesting that you get, I think, 2 types of person, like a sort of pigeonhole. You get some people that have got the creative vision, like they've got the idea of what they want to accomplish, but they don't know how to do it. And you've got other people that are kind of a bit vague on the idea, or they don't really know what they want to do, but they just want to have a go at painting. And also there's like a process with painting, I think, as there is with most creative things that you do, whether you're taking a photo, you're making a photo, aren't you? You don't just press the button, you're making. So there's a process that's almost got synergy with, say, engineering or being a carpenter, where you're building something. So what I find when I teach it is you can break it down to those components, like the process, the steps of getting from A to B to C to D to E and to your final results. And it's really interesting how some people work really well with picking up the process and going through it in a more methodical manner, whereas other people have just got the vision and they kind of, right, let's just get stuck in, I'm just going to throw some paint in it. And it's a bit more of a haphazard way, but they all get to the same end result.
And do the haphazard methods, is it still possible for them to get good results?
Well, I think sometimes they get great results. They just kind of got a vision and they just get stuck in straight away. And it's almost the confidence thing.
Isn't that exactly where we go, that person's creative because of that?
But possibly it's just that creativity is different for different people.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you said earlier about the doing it, like drawing the hands. I used to loathe the idea of running long distances. I just thought it was the most horrible, boring thing ever. And I've been doing it loads lately because off the back of a drunken bet that my friends and I did at a party, they roped me and said, let's do a half marathon because we're getting on now, past middle age, whatever. And I said, all right then. And I would never have agreed to that if I hadn't had a couple of drinks. But anyway, so we started training for it. And I never actually thought I would enjoy it. And I'm now running early morning before sunrise, still dark. And I'm doing 10K runs. And I feel amazing the rest of the day. And I'm absolutely loving it. And I thought I'd hate it. And what I found is I started off small, just a few kilometers, then 6, 7, then now 10. And the more and more you just do it, the easier it gets and the better it gets, the more you enjoy it. And now I'm actually like, I think I'm going to be doing this forever now.
It makes you feel so good, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's that sort of, you feel good about doing something, or like when you're creative, you feel good about achieving.
It,
it's that like achievement, and you get that creative spark to do more.
Yeah. So the doing it is obviously a big factor in finally getting enjoyment out of it and believing it's possible. And the practice element.
That's almost where creativity links with confidence, doesn't it? Because like for me, I don't know, I'm not artistic, but I'll knit. But it took me ages to be like, you have to be, what's the word? It's that fear of failure.
Yes.
You have to get over that. I'm going to be a bit rubbish to begin with. But actually, when you get past that point where skill isn't an issue, then you can be creative and do whatever you want. And I think
a lot of people really worry about what people think of what they've made or created.
What if it's going to be, I can't express my creativity because of this. So I think people are innately creative, but you can maybe learn to express that creativity. Maybe it's not learning to be creative.
For those people that are worried about the rejection or the fear or the failure, you can keep it quite personal. You can be a photographer or an artist. You don't need to show anyone your work until a point where you feel, actually, I'm starting to do some decent stuff here. So it shouldn't really be an issue. One of the things that I find fascinating, existing in this creative world, is sometimes stuff that is created that is supposed or allegedly meant to be creative because it's sold for millions of dollars. And I look at it and I just think, oh, that's complete drivel. I mean, a great example, Ben, is there's this shot, can't even remember the photographer's name, but I think it was just a potato on a black background sold for like $1 million. It wasn't even well lit. It wasn't. And it looked like a student
kind of
work.
Conceptual, like you take your meaning from it. I don't know. Where's the line of it just being kind of nonsense?
Yes, exactly. And there's a lot of stuff like that where I think it is actually nonsense, but sometimes the art world deliberately turns it into something for financial reasons because the artist has got a name, so therefore this must be good, this must mean something.
You see them at like museums sometimes when it would just be like an empty frame or like a stool with just like nothing on, or a chair in the middle of and that's the art. And it's like,
or
no one's done anything.
Baked beans with a tin opener next to it.
They have come up with the concept, the idea, haven't they? And they've gone and done it.
We came up with 10 concepts, Ben and I, just now.
I could just go, look, there's a cup.
Then you've got
on the table.
Yeah, but you're not doing it. You haven't done it. That's the thing. But maybe the creative
20 million.
Maybe the creative part is the concept and getting it up there and marketing it. It's being creative with that.
I think maybe,
I'm not saying I agree with it, but just playing devil's advocate. There is potentially something there.
If they came up with some really deep concept behind it and reason and like political statement, but they usually just take your own meaning from it, and then it's like there's nothing to it at all.
Interpretation could be anything, and that's funny because there was a period in photography a while back where photographers were literally, there was these images that people were like discussing. Oh, it's so amazing, the conceptual elements behind that picture of that shopping trolley in that empty car park with the bit of newspaper blowing across the landscape. And I'm like, just look at it and I think, well, that took like 1 minute to go and set up and do. You're arguing, well, they had to go out their house and they had to do it and they had to come up with the idea, boom, boom, boom. But I'm arguing that maybe they're actually quite lazy with their creativity compared to someone else who puts a huge amount of effort into something. Visually, yes, it might have meant something, but then everyone was doing it. Everyone had the same concept. And
then is that arguing like if it takes you 10 minutes to shoot a photo or someone 3 days to shoot a photo, is yours more creative? Because is theirs more creative? It's taken more time?
It's almost, isn't it? Is that just a snapshot? Is that still art as to if you've made a photo where you've actually planned that process, built it, and
it's hard. No, I don't
think there's an answer.
No, I don't think there's an answer. I don't think that the person who took 10 minutes compared to 10 hours, the 10 minute could still be more creative, could be more engaging. And there can be a lot of the deeper sentiment behind the image, but I equally think there is a lot of rubbish out there that gets palmed off as being creative when I actually think it's just quite lazy.
I'm going to enter into dangerous waters here.
Oh, okay. No. What are you going to say?
Like Jackson Pollock. He's a massively famous artist. And I just see that as like literally like my 2-year-old child could do that. It's just a big mess of paint. Like I just don't get it.
Oh, controversy.
Tim's the
artist. Tim.
Well,
Jackson Pollock.
Yeah, I think when I was at school and sort of studying art history now, I probably had a similar view with some of the sort of abstract stuff. But as I've kind of been to galleries, seeing some of this work firsthand, and also you've got to think about the kind of time that they did it and the kind of story behind it and the kind of shock factor or the fact that they're bringing something new, so it's a talking point and a concept. So there's a lot more to it than that, and I actually love some of the stuff like Jackson Pollock and these big abstracts.
Not the abstract ones like this. It's not all his work is all his paint splatter. But some of that I find is I don't mind it. Yeah. But the paint splatter stuff I just really just don't get.
Wasn't the Jackson Pollock painting in Ex Machina on the wall?
I've seen that. I can't remember.
He had it as on the wall as a.
Is there some symbolism or meaning behind it?
I don't know.
And also when you see some of these paintings like in a magazine or a book or online, they don't really have the prominence that when you see them in a gallery or on a wall, they're kind of quite awe-inspiring. And also if you think about that, where you're combining like the imagery with sort of architecture, with the right type of building to be displayed in, you're adding something extra to the room or a talking point or discussion.
One of my favourite paintings, the execution of Lady Jane Grey by Paul Delaroche. And when I show people it in a book or on a picture, they're like, yeah, it's all right. But by God, when you stand in front of it and it's huge, it's like bigger than that garage door, like roller shutter door, it's massive. And you stood there and you explore all the texture and the paint and the shimmering of it. It's a whole nother experience, it's a different feeling altogether. And that, for me, as Tim said, maybe with Jackson Pollock's like splatter type stuff, if you stood in front of it, maybe you would have a different experience.
I think also there's such a difference between creativity and skill. From like, I could be extremely skilled and be able to replicate that painting, but that's not creativity.
No,
that's copying.
That's copying,
almost.
and it's still a skill to be able to do that, but the creativity comes from the concept
and the idea
and coming up with it and potentially being the first person to do that or to be able to interpret things. Yeah. It's a very different thing.
What's really interesting on the copying kind of concept, because the art classes that I run sort of regularly in the local art studio near here is I do a weekly course throughout the year over a 4-week period, and I stand in front of the class. I paint a small example. We do a 2-hour class. I paint something that I can paint in about 30 minutes, so I know that my students, I can get them over the line within 2 hours and have a finished piece. So I paint a demo of it the night before, so I've got an example of what we're going to end up, just an oil sketch or watercolor sketch or something like of a particular subject, still life or a landscape or something, and then I paint in front of them step by step, and I said, look, we're going to use this color, I'm going to use the brush in this way, we're going to do these marks. And what is really amazing is at the end of the night we look at everyone's work together and their individual stars have all come out, and there's a complete range of stars and different feels and looks. They all come up with a great piece of work, but there's complete different stars. No one's pictures looks identical to mine.
Why would you say that is? If there's essentially following your instructions, following an image that you've already presented to them, then if we look at it from a physiological, scientific basis, hand movements have to be different. Interpretation
and I think
has
their
to be
interpretation
different.
And just they've obviously got, I think you've got a vision that you want to paint, or no one copies the exact way I hold the brush, the exact way I move it. They've got their own way of doing it. I'll explain the ways to hold the brush or why I'm doing it this way. But I look around and some of sometimes this, so they go in a completely different tangent. Part of it is they really enjoy being there for the evening, the process of painting, but it's really great seeing how
they come up with
you start off copying, and there is people that are amazing copying, and forgery is a big thing in art, and they reckon like sort of 10% of art in galleries is almost forgeries of the great. art, so you can identically copy a piece of artwork if you want, and even get it full the experts into it. But it's when I think the people's own personality come out in the way they paint. Like some people use very bold, brash kind of loose brush marks, and some people are kind of really finicky and really tight movements, and it's hard to get someone that likes doing really nice detailed marks, delicate who's delicate, their personality. So their personality comes out in the type of marks that they make.
Would you say them attending your art classes and copying what you're doing, is that them being creative, or is that them just practicing a skill? Like, are they different things?
I guess because if
they are being creative, because they're coming up with something. I'm just showing them a process, some skills set, and I try and set a project each week that I can teach them different techniques that they can then go and use in their own.
We have had a previous podcast on plagiarism, copying and stuff before, and I think this kind of came up in that. But essentially, anyone who's learning any new creative skill is going to have to copy something to begin with. And even if we're talking about like being a kung fu master, you're going to have to learn the kung fu moves. You're not going to just turn up and go, I'm not doing those moves, I'm going to make up my own.
So you need to learn the steps, the process, and then you need to work out how you're going to use that yourself.
That's about learning a skill though, isn't it? Like kung fu is a skill. You're not...
Yeah, but maybe the way you lay the brush and the paint down is a skill. And when you get to the skill part and you know how to mix the colour and do the thing, then you go off and do your own thing altogether. Same with photography. Most photographers start off almost copying some other photographer's style.
Because for me, the creativity is the ideas and being able to sort of transform your ideas into reality rather than actually learning.
Yeah, because if we took this back to like can you learn to be creative at Tim's art classes? If you went there for the first one and your painting was rubbish, then you kept going back every week, and then you started doing a good painting. Is that learning to be creative then? Like, have you?
Or is it learning to paint?
Or is it?
That's like this is the thing. It depends on.
I've got the definition of creativity.
What is the definition of creativity, Ben?
The use of imagination or original ideas to create something. So it's kind of what you were saying then. It's
so like the original ideas, the idea, the concept, the exploration of that is the important factor, but you can't express that.
So maybe you can't,
unless you've got a way of putting it onto a medium.
So maybe you can't learn to be creative. Maybe everyone's creative. They just need to learn the skills to be able to do it.
I don't know. I don't think everyone actually has ideas.
No.
So
maybe they don't.
Not everyone is bothered about conceptual ideas. I mean, to me...
Maybe it's hard for us to understand as people who are generally quite creative.
There's some great ways to make it easier to get some ideas. Like when I used to do a lot of kind of more editorial style illustration, or I used to do a lot of work for kind of companies that are selling like visually quite boring, like maybe a financial product, like a pension or a kind of... ISA, a wealth management kind of scheme, or an insurance for that. And that's really dull as dishwater to try and come up with an illustration that you can then use to put on the front of their brochure to sell that product. But then you can start thinking, well, what's the key things within that? And you can write down some words, like do like a mind map of words. So you've got kind of growth, and then you can work out sort of synergies of things growing, people growing, longevity, or throwing the net out to catch more stuff. So you come up with you can have a really beautiful woodcut of a fisherman casting the net out, do you know what I mean? And pulling it in. So there you've got so you can use symbolism and association with imagery to match, but that you can get to just from doing some words. But also if people are just looking for ideas, sort of going out and going to your local galleries, watching movies, listening to music, or just looking up stuff online.
That's inspiration, isn't it?
Yeah, so then you can find inspiration.
To be creative from inspiration. But are there people in the world that have no interest in culture, don't really want to take any inspiration from anything, watch a great movie, didn't give a crap about it, read a book, didn't like it, don't have any ideas about anything much? Are there people like that?
Yeah, someone could watch movies like every week but not be bothered about creating anything from it. They just want a bit of entertainment. Is
it emotion then? Are there people that are just emotionless? Maybe creativity is a form of expression from emotion. Like, for example, if you watch a really great film, it should engage with you on some sort of emotional level, whether it's sadness, joy, up and down, whatever. But are there, psychopaths and different people out there with their brains wired differently, where emotion doesn't really come into their lives as much, and therefore they have no inclination or emotional, instinct to want to even create? Surely there's got
I
to
guess
be...
there probably is, but they'd have a very grey and kind of boring existence, wouldn't they? If you weren't
absolutely.
like kind
Of
of...
course
you
they
can
would.
still feel a lot of emotions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to use those to create anything.
No.
I suppose. Because
yeah.
if you watch movies, you might cry at the end or whatever, but that doesn't mean that you really want to go out and make a movie.
No, not at all.
No, I know. I
Yeah.
know. So those people would appreciate the art.
Yeah, maybe that's
but
the way it's-
not actually want to engage in it. But what my point is we're talking about, can you learn to be creative? Therefore, if we're saying that someone who's like completely grey, dull, emotionless, has no incentive or comprehension of wanting to be creative or even having any conceptual ideas, then the opposite end of the scale is someone who really does. So therefore, that person surely must be more creative than the other. But then again, they might not have the skills.
Yeah.
So it's a combination.
So the skills is easy to learn, isn't it?
Yeah, the
you
dull
can
person
learn the
could learn
skills
Yeah.
from time.
Yeah.
It just
So
takes
can you
it's the
take
time.
the grey, dull person,
Yeah, 'cause I think-
and force them to learn the skills,
Yeah.
and not give the skills to the really emotion-based person?
Yeah, if we took like say product photography for example, if someone learned it, they just watched every product class you've ever done or whatever, knew exactly how to light a wine bottle or whatever it is. They know how to do it, but they might not kind of give a crap about it. But then we'll see the final picture and be like, wow, look at that amazing photo that they took. They must
But
be
it's
so
funny
creative.
though, because
They're really skilled, but they're not necessarily creative.
I think everyone is kind of creative, and I think you see that
generous. I think being too generous.
Yeah, but I think you see that when people are younger, like in young kids, everyone can draw.
Right.
But you don't need to necessarily draw something that looks like something.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're expressing your own creativity in your own drawing. It might just be even like matchstick men.
Yeah.
And that. And you, like most people with kids, have got a photo on or drawing on the fridge from the sort of primary school or that is got some creativity there. And I think as you get older, you either go down a route where you don't have time, or it's not your interest of being creative any longer, or you then get nervous about, am I good enough? So it's your kind of inhibitions that hold you back from wanting to do that.
Sorry, you go.
Oh, I was going to say, it's more about sort of like the inspiration around you and how you're brought up, who you're around, what sort of people to inspire you to be, express that creativity.
But it seems then that the majority of people judge someone's creativity based on their output rather than what's going on in their head conceptually, because it's the output that is the gauge or benchmark, if you like, of what they're able to do. But actually that could possibly or quite probably be the wrong approach, because if we're going to base it just on output, then you could say AI is creative when AI isn't even human, but it can output stuff that looks creative, can win photography competitions or create what looks like fantastic art when it's just referencing,
it's just plagiarizing everything else that everyone's created, isn't it?
Form or interpreted it slightly differently.
Because I might completely copy some complete unknown artist that none of you know, do this amazing thing. I'm skilled at it because I could recreate it, and you'd be like, oh, she's so creative, but actually I'm not, because I've just ripped someone off. It's a real balance.
Yeah, this is really interesting actually, because when we dissect this about learning to be creative, there is clearly then a separation between having skill and having imagination.
Well, the definition of it is,
the imagination is the element, isn't it?
It's the use of imagination or original ideas. Like, loads of stuff's already been done, so
everything's
exactly
done.
So what does that mean, that no one's creative anymore? Because that doesn't work, you know?
I mean, it's interesting though, we say everything's been done. Had anyone cut a cow in half and put it in formaldehyde in a big acrylic block before Damien Hirst did it, or Shark, whatever?
No, and this is like where like artists like Jackson Pollock are really important, because they were the first to do that kind of art. So it's a statement. Well, maybe, but throughout history, there's lots of great moments that you can mark with different types of art. And it's like, we met the other day, we were chatting about Picasso and like his style of paint, like his kind of more abstract faces and that.
Love that stuff.
And I read recently, he was inspired by a lot of the African tribe of like sculptures.
Oh, okay.
There. So that's kind of
one art.
So that was, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, he saw something, and then that just gets stored in your.
What I like about that though is he didn't go out and just create a bunch of sculptures.
No, he didn't. He
just took it to a different medium.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, though, Jackson Pollock. I saw this woman that was like an artist, and she was drinking like soy milk with coloured dye in, drinking and then puking all over the canvas to make these splatters. To make these splatters. So
do you think that was really just sort of more for shock factor because it was going to generate a story?
Is that creative?
It doesn't sound it
maybe
to me.
To someone.
Maybe that's more shock and marketing, isn't it?
I think creativity is so subjective. This is what we've gained from this, isn't it? Like what you may think is creative, I might not think, but it's where I put value on certain things.
I mean, even like my own work, I wouldn't really define it as high level creativity, because a lot of the work I create for clients is they've come up with the concept and the idea. My job is to execute it. My role in creativity is actually mostly problem solving. It's like
it's the process, isn't it?
It's the process of problem solving that is the creative part for me. I mean, yes, I do shoot some of my own conceptual images and ideas, like the baby in the marine pollution one, the original idea, etc., and put a lot of work into that. And I do that with some of my shots. But for most of my commercial work, it's someone else telling me what to do.
Yeah. There must be some creativity in that problem solving there. If you need to get the glasses to balance that. So if it's not like a learned thing from another product photographer or like a known technique, then you've got to be creative of like how you can get the light through the back of that product or how you could do. Is that
I suppose creative? Is that creative? I mean, I just always consider that just good real pragmatic
skill
for practical skills.
The critical thinking.
But you could argue the same about a really good carpenter who finds new ways to,
or a footballer that has got a creative way of scoring a goal, doesn't it?
Where does it start? I definitely think we're onto something though with skills and imagination.
Yeah. Those are two very different things.
But that's the thing though, isn't it? It's like someone really high skilled but with no imagination can literally just sort of rip off other people's exact style of work, but they've got the skill to lay it down. But the unknown audience of that piece of art or picture or whatever, they might go, oh, he's so creative or she's so creative. And what they didn't realize was actually none of it is original. It's all conceptual. And guys, if you haven't listened to our podcast on plagiarism, there's some really good comparisons in that one. But
if I take it back to like what I know, so I love knitting. I'm quite good at knitting. I'd say I'm very highly skilled at knitting.
Okay, good.
I can follow a pattern.
I need a new beanie app.
I can make you a beanie. I can follow a pattern. Doesn't matter what it is, I can do it because I've practiced that skill.
Yeah.
It's not creative. It's just following a pattern.
Right.
It's following it using the skills.
It's more of a technician.
Yeah.
Right.
But when I then take that, make my own patterns, do different colours, do different things, that's where I'm bringing my creativity. And I think that's where you can see the very different sides of it.
Yeah.
Creativity is using my own ideas to transform what I already know, but I can only do that because of the skills that I've learned.
So there may be, probably, likely, in existence, many artists that are actually slightly hoodwinking us because all they're doing is replicating someone else's style and ideas, or there's artists that bring in new ideas into ideas they've learnt and introduce new imagination, new things. That is creativity. They've acquired the skill and now they're bringing in their own imaginations.
And I think it's that thing of you can learn creativity, or you can learn to express your creativity by becoming skilled at something.
Yeah.
That's how I see it in my head.
So this goes back to the whole gallery that Ben was walking around with, like the empty picture frame or the chair stood there. is that actually then maybe more creative than you thought because someone had a concept and an idea,
a vision
that was original to them that actually didn't need a huge amount of skill to execute, like the shot of the potato.
Yeah.
But you see, the problem for me is I can't get my head around it because I don't see anything creative in the concept of the
Maybe
potato.
we're saying that there needs to be, like you learn a skill and then you bring your own creativity into that skill.
Yeah.
Like, because like that potato, like was pretty like basic.
It was, well, even the skill level on what the way it was lit was basic.
Yeah, and an empty frame in a gallery, like there's no skill involved, but there's creativity. So maybe kind of we more highly regard when there's a combination of the both.
Yeah.
So it's the skill almost, from what we've said, Ben, it's the skill that you're more impressed with rather than the like the skill set of the way that someone can deliver their...
Like Dali, he had the skill and then his ideas are, I guess, original. We don't know for sure, but I'm assuming they are, like with the melting clocks and those weird monsters and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
So he's doing both, isn't he?
Weird,
so creative
dream stuff.
And Starry Night and stuff. It's so kind of weird and cool.
That was Van Gogh, wasn't it?
Starry Night.
But you can see conceptual, imagined ideas there, and
then the skill, because it looks
and he had like those two artists, Van Gogh and Dali. They've both got a strong personal style as well. So they've worked and honed their skills and developed their own style of painting. So it's recognizable.
Yeah.
Or if you take, for example, Renoir and observations of Parisians or Monet or whatever, could you argue, well, they're not really being creative because they're just arriving at a scene, looking at it and copying the scene?
Well, knowing that scene there's something to it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's where the creativity comes in.
That emotional...
And also they're interpreting the scene completely different to it as it actually was.
Because it's in the same way that, we have a lot of photography classes on our platform, and upcoming photographers will copy your work that you've done in the class, which is what we completely encourage them to do.
Yeah.
That's not being creative.
No,
but when
that's learning the skill.
That's learning the skills. But once they've learnt that skills and then they take it and come up with their own concepts, they want it to look like it's in a bar. They want it to do that. That's creative.
Yeah. And that's
there is a very clear definition.
But surely as
distinction.
On a personal level for anyone doing that must be the moment of satisfaction when you've made something original using the skills you've learnt. Rather than go, I'm really proud of that picture and I'm going to show it, I'm going to enter it in a competition, but actually it's complete plagiarization of someone else's work. But compared to imagine putting those skills into a new concept, new idea that no one has done before.
Like when people go away from Tim's art class, then they take a photo themselves and paint that themselves. And is that when they're being creative?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do in the class, because we're in our evening work a lot from photographs. A photograph that I've took that I take along as a sample example for them to each have a reference to start with. But I'm always talk about the fact, look, we're not copying photograph.
No.
This is just a kind of
exercise.
This is like the inspiration that we're starting with. So I don't want them to worry about making a photographic clone of the image there. That's just a starting point of what they can base the initial drawing, the sketch on. So like the last one we did, it was just a watercolor of a sort of autumn woodland scene that they kind of requested to learn how to paint trees and that in autumnal colors. So we had a starting point, but they all came up with a different examples of that thing. So it's not a draftsman's skills of just copying the tree. It's using that as a starting point. And then they all had some very varied styles, and they all came up with a great piece of work. And it's very interesting how they all felt that they could have done perhaps a little bit better with it, but they look at their person sat next to them and they go, wow, yours looks amazing. And then when I look at it, they've all reached a similar level. They've all accomplished something which I think is quite incredible within 2 hours from where they started with probably no knowledge at all. They've all come up with a really competent piece of work, a lovely sketch, learnt some new skills and put their own creative touch on it, because they've all, and I always encourage them, you can see different styles coming out, like the type of brush marks, whether it's really dainty and carefully considered or more kind of loose and bold marks. And I kind of encourage that personal style out in each sense through the evening. So I don't want them just to copy what I've done. I want them, so I'd say even when they're working from a photograph that I've taken, that I've given to them, they've all put their own creative spin on that, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. Even if they're trying to copy me exactly, I think to copy someone identical takes a lot of skill, whereas to come up with something from you and the way that you like to hold the brush, or it might be writing a song or music, creating some craft, or like there's so many avenues, isn't there, for creativity, or even...
Do you think if you took like 5 people that weren't like photographers or videographers or whatever, and you went inside the woods at the Golden Hour and you set the camera settings or whatever in the camera, and you gave them all the camera and said make a little video or make a photo, do you think that would be a good determination of creativity?
I think so, because they would come back with the storytelling.
Yeah, because if they would like kind of know what shots, they might try and put like the hair flowing like in front of the lens.
And that's because I think in those instances you have to pre-visualize, you have to imagine. And if we base it, if we take this down to what, you know, the base level, what we're saying is that your level of imagination is creativity. So therefore those with greater imagination are potentially more creative, although they might not have the skill set to put it down. But assuming everyone had an equal skill set, then those with the greater imagination are going to be the ones that are more creative. And therefore, your example in the woods, pre-visualization is imagination.
Yeah, because they would have been, the camera would have been set and the light would have been determined if you took them.
Not set position, just settings on the camera.
That's what I mean, the settings on the camera. So it would be up to them to come up with the angles and the shots and the, you know, putting in like
the decisions,
or doing that movement around the head, or you know,
anticipating how it's going to
because they would have had, no skill would have been involved prior to that, you know.
So are we all wrong?
Why?
And you can't learn creativity because from this.
Well, we know you can learn skill.
You can learn skill.
You can learn skill.
Are people just innately more creative than others then?
Interesting. This goes back a little bit to whether or not you believe, and also by doing. I never thought I would be able to run long distance, but by doing, I've been able to do so. Is that a skill, or is that just impetus to do it and get into it, and you've trained your brain to accept you can do it? Potentially then you can equally train your brain to be more imaginative, more creative, because I also find, like many of us, is I take inspiration from all areas, books, films, you know, stories, everything, art, music, and I absorb that and then release it in different ways. Maybe if you get into that mindset, then you can have a greater level of imagination. I potentially believe, yes, that you could take someone who is at level 5 right now, and you could move their imagination to level 6 with practice. I think you can. I think you can train the brain to be more imaginative.
Yeah, so if they could draw already via, like, I don't know, architecture or something like that, they already knew how to draw, and then you know, they went on Pinterest boards and they looked at these characters and they studied this, and then they kind of and then they sat down and said, right, what's my idea going to be? What am I going to draw, or what am I going to paint, or whatever? Then I think they would probably come up with something if they'd done all that. Like,
it's almost about discipline or inclination, isn't it?
Well, and a great comparison would be, because we've got another podcast topic. I'm not sure if it's out yet or it's coming, but it's on creative block. You know, when your imagination gets blocked, some writers get writer's block, or artists. Now, essentially, creative block is the opposite of extra imagination. So therefore, if you can go one way with less imagination, why can't you go the other way with more imagination?
And I think as well, most people are being creative in their everyday life. Like if you're putting stuff out on social media, do you know what I mean? And even if you're using an app like Instagram or that, where you're putting a story out, you have a choice of fonts, or do you know what I mean, and colours. So people are making creative decisions. Even if they've took a photo and you can say, well, the photo they took is rubbish, they've still took that photo, they've still had the creative idea to take that photo, whether it's a great photo or a very poor photo, and then they maybe make a decision they're going to put some text over it to say a little bit about what's happening that day. It might be a promotion for something, and then they're choosing the fonts, the colours. Do you know what I mean? So they're making some creative decisions, even in a very small way.
Yeah. Once you start going down the route and exploring and developing, I think you do. Yeah.
Okay. So we've established then that we can learn to be more imaginative.
Yes.
Is that the word? But we've also established that 10,000 hours of practice is going to considerably help your skill level.
Yes.
So skill level, and also I think as your skill level improves and increases, your feeling of the ability to be creative could increase with it, because you have that level of confidence that comes with it as well. So, we've got written down here, defining that elusive concept and, originality, problem solving, emotional expression. But that can be translated to other things well beyond the traditional arts, like science, engineering, you mentioned before, cooking.
I think it goes back to evolution, doesn't it? When caveman first invented or came across fire, do you know what I mean? Or the early cave paintings the
first cave paintings was usually just a drawing around the hand, wasn't it? Or
and then but it's a way of using creativity and creative thinking to communicate, isn't it? And like I imagine, like storytelling and music and that in throughout evolution is used at passing on. Nowadays it's really easy just to document everything on a video or a camera or that, but in the early days of evolution you're needing to use these creative methods of documenting, like the early cave paintings in France where they're depicting the hunts and the different animals that
That's funny though, isn't it? Because that was the very earliest art, but was that creative, or was that just creating a record, a story of this was a deer, this was a saber-toothed tiger, this was a hunter, and this is my handprint? Was that more just a record, or was that being creative? Because surely if they were going to be creative, they should have hung an empty frame on the wall of their cave.
I think the creative bit, isn't it, is someone had to think, this would be a good way of, this would be a good, it might have been an accidental, it might have just been some charcoal from the fire, they've made a mark on the wall, but it's a way of the evolution and the personal kind of process of learning and think, that works well, I can leave a note for someone that way, I can leave a mark.
And that early history, we're going, there's like 70,000 years ago, some of those cave paintings. If we step back maybe just 10,000 years, the Egyptians, they looked very creative because the figures they created had weird bird heads and other elements to them, and the figures almost looked alien, and the way they drew their cats with jewelry.
Maybe that was documentation of the ancient aliens.
Here we go. His imagination is getting away with him now.
So,
but that period of the Egyptians seemed to me to be a very creative period, with the pyramids and the sphinxes and the tombs, the hieroglyphics, the art that they created.
They created a form of communication, which is hieroglyphics, and obviously that translates to us like with text and stuff, but now we don't see text as creative. Obviously books and stuff are, but like the actual just writing and reading is not creative.
Letters,
but that's because it's a given now, but it probably was it would have been at the start.
I suppose it also then goes back to having the time to be creative, because you do need to have that time and that headspace, isn't it? And when we've seen the biggest advancements in creativity is when the society's not worrying about surviving or worrying about going through.
Well, they must have had a lot of time on their hands back then, because they literally built the pyramids.
Yes, but but
Pharaohs did it.
Is that what I told someone to?
No, that's what I mean. That they didn't have. They had the free time. Whereas society, and you have to give yourself time to be creative.
You do.
Art and culture and creativity is very important for society, and I think that's why most government and most locations there's kind of a kind of cultural or arts staff committee or body that's encouraging more people into the arts and creativity in most countries, towns and cities, doesn't it?
That it's cultural importance and significance, especially in terms of just expressing ideas as well. But yeah, you're right. Time is an important thing because a lot of people use that as an excuse. Oh, I don't have time to be creative or start a new skill because I just don't have the time.
You have to force yourself.
You've got to force yourself.
I have to be like,
I never thought I'd have the time to go running, but I'm going at 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
And
so you just do it. And a great way is just get a sketchbook or a notepad. Just like you say, get up 10 minutes earlier each day, and then you do 10 minutes scribbling down some ideas, whether it's just written ideas. I mean, a lot of great musicians and artists, you often hear the stories of how a song came about, and they just jotted down some notes on a train after they woke up, after a dream, or just a moment of inspiration.
And it's funny because some of them talk about how they wrote a whole album in a day, and others took 20 years. But both results were great. And you know,
it wasn't Avatar, that was dreamed up by James Cameron, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then he wrote it down and made a movie about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same when I paint. Sometimes a painting might take me months in my studio, and other times I might paint something in an hour or so that is, and there's no one that's better or worse. And I remember I had a great tutor at college, Barry Rowe, that I was really friendly with, and he won a big art competition once with a big prize money, and he said the only mistake he made when he accepted the prize, and telling me, he told them that he painted that picture in 15 minutes. It was an exceptional piece of work,
right?
But the value that he'd won, like they were shocked. But he spent his whole life learning to get to that point, and his creative idea.
So people would have valued the work less because he created it quickly, but didn't value how many years of skill it took to be able to do that.
No one else would have painted that quickly. It would have took hours or days to work it out. It was
the moral of the story is don't tell anyone how long it took to create a piece if you're very proud of it or it does well. Okay, I think we've done well on that one, guys. Can you learn to be creative? I think we've separated skill from imagination. We've realized that we think that you can actually improve your imagination with practice as well. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to have creative block because that's the opposite direction. And we've explored that Ben's not a big Jason Pollock fan. Jackson Pollock, sorry. Okay,
nor are you.
No, I do like his stuff, but
it would be interesting to hear what other people think, though, because we're obviously surrounded by creatives all the time, work in a creative environment. It would actually be interesting to hear maybe the flip
so if you're watching this on YouTube or in one of the other platforms where you can leave a comment, let us know below what you feel or think.
Also, if
or
there's some
us.
things subjects you'd like us to tackle.
What do you think about Jackson Pollock?
Do you agree with
Jason Pollock?
Are you on Team Tim or Team Ben?
All right, guys, thanks very much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
This was the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast, hosted by visualeducation.com.